Upheaval has kind of been the name of the game ever since COVID rolled in. And in the past week or so, that upheaval has hit city streets and even the leader of Canada's official opposition. The artificial intelligence algorithm known as Polly has been scanning throughout for signs of what Canadians think of it all. Erin Kelly is CEO of Advanced Symbolics Inc, which runs the AI, and she joins us now from the National Capital Region on what Polly's picking up. Erin, good to see you again. I gotta, ask you right off the top, since, well, I don't know if you're right in the thick of it, but you're close enough to the thick of it. How are you and your family doing? Has this been disruptive to you, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. And I think times like this, like my fellow neighbors, fellow people in Ottawa, we're working overtime to try and keep ourselves calm. It's a huge soup of emotions, from worry, anger, anxiety, and for people who are right in the thick of it, I mean, they're not sleeping. I mean, the horns only stop when the occupiers have their prayer time, because of course at the root of this is a Christian movement, and so they take time for prayer. But other than that, the horns are going all the time.
Now, your offices are in downtown Ottawa, so do I assume that you have not been to your office lately?
We cannot get to the office, and we're not even making the attempt. Our office is right at 1 Rideau, so it's right in the thick of all of it.
And what about disruption in terms of kids getting to school, or you getting out to, or your husband getting out to shop, or anything like that? What's the story there?
Well, the kids are able to get to school, so we live far enough out from it that we're able to get to school, but we're not able to go see our family. We had to cancel 2 outings the last 2 weekends because we were to get together with friends, and it was just impossible because we'd have to we were planning to meet in the center of the city, but even then, because of where people are located, so many of the roads are blocked that you just can't get through the city in any reliable way. So we've canceled anything other than going to school, going to the grocery store. We're really not socializing. Well,
let me get a better understanding of that, because of course the impression that television leaves is that this is all pretty much concentrated in the downtown core of Ottawa. Are you saying it goes beyond that?
Well, it's in the downtown core, but see, so many people live in neighborhoods that surround they've cut off the interprovincial bridges. They've cut off a lot of the on-ramps and off-ramps on the highway. So the demonstrators, well, the demonstrators aren't even just in the core. Some of them are in the park on Coventry Road, because they've moved some of them they've got like semi-permanent encampments now with tents and barbecues and have you. So they're sort of on the east end. So they've got people in different encampments. And because of that, they're cutting off highway access. So the noise is in the downtown core, but the traffic disruptions are wider than that.
Gotcha. Now, I gather one of the things that authorities are now trying to do is, and this is not exact language here, but it's kind of starve them out, right? Don't let them have any gas. Don't give them access to food, other staples, other reinforcements. Any sense about whether that's working?
Well, that just started at like 2 o'clock in the morning yesterday. So everybody woke up this morning, oh, yay, they raided them at 2 in the morning. But then the TikTok started, and the occupiers are sending out videos showing that they're still barbecuing and everything's great. Now, I don't know how much of that is bravado, but it definitely gives the sense. What we're seeing people are saying is, enough with, we're doing this tactic, we're doing that tactic. When are they leaving? It's not enough to say we gave out 450 tickets and we're stopping them and we're taking their food. When are they leaving? And that is really the question. All of these other things were fine last week. If you told us last week that you were giving out tickets, but this week people just want the mayor or whoever to say Wednesday at noon, that's the deadline, and then it's done. But we're not hearing that. We're just hearing that there's more tactics, there's more police coming, but people aren't satisfied with that anymore.
No, there is no answer to the question, when are they leaving yet, is there?
Not that we're aware. I think some of us you see people online kind of hoping that there's some big plan, and the powers that be just can't tell us what it is, right? And you've got all these, because Ottawa is kind of a town of like military experts and what have you. So everybody's kind of, I'm sure they've got some sort of big plan. But I mean, when you're 11 days into it, and that hope's kind of fading.
Right. Now, you're going to take us through some of the numbers that Polly has discovered over the last little while. But just before we do that, I wonder whether you are picking up a distinction that the population makes in terms of, kind of like the bad apples associated with this thing and the sort of genuine, well-hearted people who are just trying to make a point. Does Polly pick up a distinction between those two groups?
Yes, she does. And the distinction, so when before the convoy, if you will, came in, there was actually a lot of sympathy for them. It was over 50% of people were sympathetic with the message of government overreach, the mandating vaccines for truckers. There's almost no support for that. There was no support for that before this even started, for mandating vaccines for truckers. I mean, people really saw that as a political thing and not a something that was necessary for public health. That was the public opinion that we saw. But after they came in, that evaporated to a large extent because of people started to see it as a Trojan, like we're coming in to fight for freedom. And when we get here, there's swastikas, there's defecating on the monuments, there's pulling down pride flags and all sorts of violent things, assaulting. People have been assaulted. So then so then people started to think, well, maybe this whole thing is just a Trojan. Now it's coming back where people are back to feeling that the cause itself, if people could stick to that, there is a lot of sympathy for it. We're seeing about 45% sympathy for the cause, and only about, well, today it's 18% sympathy for the actual occupiers themselves, the event. Like, so there are people who are going out to the parties and stuff like that, and that's so, which is a sizable amount. But I think it would be higher. The support would be higher if they stuck to their central message, because there are a lot of people, and that's what they've done, is they've glommed onto discontent with the mandates to fundraise. Because if they said we're going to have a rally, for a Christian rally in Ottawa, nobody would be giving money or coming. But saying that this is about human rights, et cetera, gave them privileged access to the city, gave them a huge following, gave them lots of money. And now people are kind of discovering that that's not entirely what it's about. And we have seen now that there are biker gangs mixed in there. Now, the sad part is, and there's sympathy coming out now for the truckers themselves, because they're actually probably the most pure-hearted of this. And residents, because they're frustrated, are going around taking pictures of their license plates and there's a class action lawsuit, but they're also using that to get access to their insurance and to rat out on them and to find their suppliers. They're getting huge fines. So probably at the end of the day, they will be financially, I think they're going to come out of this realizing that they're going to take a big financial hit, probably some economic, long-term implications, whereas the central organizers themselves probably won't. So,
do you have a distinctive percentage? You may have just given it, but I'm not sure I heard it. Do you have a distinctive percentage that Polly picks up of those who in the city actually support reducing mandates? Is a very broad expression, but obligations to show vaccine passports, obligations to get vaccinated, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's at 45% now. It was over 50%. And here's the thing. Like, I don't think the Prime Minister has to look like he's negotiating with these people directly, but I think the premiers could help a lot by starting to relax. I think they're already thinking about relaxing some of these mandates, but there's definitely, and for some of the mandates, for example, with the travel one, where you're getting tested to go into the US or wherever, and then you might be coming back 3 days later and you have to test again. And then sometimes they're pulling you out of the line and testing you in line. You're getting 3 tests sometimes when you're traveling, where COVID is circulating in the community and they don't have enough tests to even test people who have symptoms. So it's not a public health thing anymore, it's performative. And people are also really angry, we're seeing, at political leaders, because they're saying that the Prime Minister and the Conservatives have been politicizing vaccines so much that it's no longer about healthcare. It's Conservatives don't get vaccinated. I mean, the Prime Minister's been telling us that for 6 months. Why do we put up with these people? They're Conservatives, they don't get vaccinated. The Conservatives have been taking selfies with the protesters, not helping to negotiate a solution, just taking selfies. And so people have said that is a cause of the problems that people are saying, I'm not going to get vaccinated because I don't believe it's not part of my politics. Nothing to do anymore with whether or not it's the right thing to do from a health perspective. And that's why you see the third booster shot is way down because, well, first of all, people don't really think it's that effective, but also it's become so politicized. So it's that wedging all the time. And so you see in Ottawa, people are really intolerant of that now, of politicians trying to come in and curry favor with one side or the other by saying these guys are taking pictures or these guys are anti-vaxxers or what have you. It's
Can I circle back to the religious angle on this? Because, of course, this all started, I guess, mostly with truckers being upset about, well, we should point out 90% of truckers have been vaccinated. So we're talking about a small percentage of truckers who are unhappy about obligations to get vaccinated, incursions on their freedom, and so on. Okay, all of that, it's obviously morphed a lot from there. So the Hells Angels, the racists, the bigots, the so-called deplorables, all of these other people who've decided to show up and sort of piggyback on something and turn it into something that maybe the originators had not intended, particularly the religious groups. Can you just shed a little more light on that? What's the religious angle here?
Yeah, so the religious angle that's actually where the fundraising is coming from. So there were a group of people who are upset about mandates. They seem to have been organized by the religious right that has a big funding organization, mainly out of the United States. So we ran, because a lot of people were saying it was Russians and stuff like that, we actually ran Polly to see where the funding for this is coming from. And we saw, even before they switched it over to this religious site, that it was coming from Canadians and Americans. And in fact, even as the convoy was coming in, there were people in Ottawa giving to this GoFundMe page. So not anymore, though. It's really for the new one that people in the city aren't giving to it. But so they're really the financial backing. So as I said, they glommed on to these people as this is our excuse to break into the mainstream, because fundraising for a religious cause is not going to garner many donations, but saying that we're fighting human rights, that this is a big injustice. If you go to their funding page, it's all about Canada we used to save the world, we used to save human rights, now you need to save us, that kind of thing, because we're basically living under a dictatorship, and the Americans are lapping that up. Oh my gosh, we got to go save Canada because they're right on our border. But at their core, they are a religious group. I mean, they sent out an announcement on Sunday saying they're taking some time off from honking their horns so they could pray. And everybody did that. Even the truckers, who presumably aren't here for a religious retreat, stopped honking. So it's like a cult is forming here.
But this GoFundMe thing, which was the original way of raising money, did anybody have any sense about what's going to happen to all that money, how it's going to be dispersed, et cetera?
So GoFundMe is going to give it back to the people if they ask them to, and the rest will go to charity. But they've already raised over $4 million since the GoFundMe thing shut down. So this is not going away, and that's the thing that's frustrating here. And I'm hoping that the powers that be in Ottawa, and we're losing faith, day by day here, that they understand this is not just about a trucker protest. This is not a protest. The protest was a Trojan to get access to the city, to get access to fundraising. The funds, they're looking to raise 16 million now, and they're over 4 million in just a few days. So the more the government looks to be oppressing them, the more money they raise. And you see the headlines in the States, like they are really taking this out of proportion, and that's leading to more fundraising. So I don't know what the future holds when the organizers have all this money. People go home, presumably they're coming back, and this is kind of like a test run to see how it works. I
do want to ask you about the discrimination angle in all of this, and to do that, let me go back to an analogy with January 6th of last year in the United States, where the point was made that if you had several thousand black people who were storming Capitol Hill, as opposed to several thousand white people storming Capitol Hill, the police reaction would have been somewhat different. That was the suggestion anyway. Now, we look at the faces in the crowd of this protest, and they're overwhelmingly white faces again. Has there been any suggestion made here that if this were, for example, a Black Lives Matter protest and occupation of the city, that the reaction from the authorities might be different.
Yes, absolutely. People are drawing that link, and they're talking about the G20 and other protests, because we have a lot of protests here in Ottawa where people were arrested and all of that. Now, people do understand, though, that this one is a little bit different because there are tanker trucks full of gas in the city core and outside the city. I mean, hundreds of them. And what the police chief has been saying is that makes it dangerous. If they get into, God forbid, a gunfight and things get ignited, there could be explosions. So that's what's worrying the chief, and people understand that. But at the same time, there have been videos circulating of Ottawa police, and they're being interviewed by the protester, the occupiers, whatever, and they're saying, so what do you think of this protest? And they're going, oh, it's great. The police officer, it's great. And the government's really going to have to listen to you guys now. So that obviously doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, right? And the feeling that it's not just about the tanker trucks, that the police are chatting up the protesters. They don't seem very fussed about it. And, we're 11 days into it and nothing has happened.
Well, let me follow up on that, because the Ontario Liberal leader, Stephen Del Duca, had a news conference this morning at which he said, it's enough already. He called them occupiers. He said the occupiers have to leave. If they don't, he says the authorities should move in and take their trucks. And not only that, send them a bill for the extra policing that has been required, start to sue some people. I mean, he's obviously talking about much, much tougher measures. Has Pauly surveyed that? And if so, what does she pick up in terms of whether there'd be any public appetite for that?
Well, we're already doing it. There's a class action lawsuit today that the citizens have organized. A lawyer in Ottawa named Paul Champ, who is trying to get an injunction on the noise and all of that stuff. So the Liberal leader is a bit behind the times on this one. What I would say is people are very angry that neither the federal government nor the provincial government have helped. I mean, they keep saying it's not their job, but in Quebec, François Legault sent the Ministry of Transportation to go and stop all the trucks before they came in, do inspections, send them back if they had anything wrong with them. And he managed to get them out in a day. So, but that was something that the province would have had to do. And there was no support from the province. In fact, Doug Ford said, God bless the protesters for carrying the Canadian flag. This was in reference to how they were defecating on the monuments. I mean, there's a real rage here, I would say, about leaving this. Now, I understand that other municipalities managed to get the demonstrators out, but they had the hindsight of what had happened in Ottawa.
Exactly. No, that's the point for what happened in Toronto this past weekend, is the authorities here saw what could happen, and so they took different steps. I got a minute left, Erin, here. Let me ask you about this. In Washington, D.C., I mean, they have the District of Columbia, right? In Washington, D.C., there is a separate geographical political entity called Washington, D.C. We sort of do, but sort of don't have that in here. I mean, this is one of the problems. There's an Ottawa Police Service, there's the province of Ontario, the province of Quebec, the National Capital Region, which encompasses both provinces, and the federal government as well. Do we need some different kind of overarching district authority here to handle all this?
Well, that discussion of that has really ratcheted up online because of this, because the police chief has been saying there were structures set up on NCC land. People are saying, take it down. They were putting canisters of fuel there. And he said, I can't just go take it down. That's NCC land. And so between all of those different jurisdictions, and it's always been a pain point here. It was a problem when that soldier was killed, the day that Michael Bebo went and killed that soldier, Nathan
Cirillo.
Yes, Nathan Cirillo, we had the Parliament Hill police and we had the Ottawa police and we had, there was no coordination. And so people are saying we need to have, like they have in Washington, D.C., one level of government that coordinates everything, and so that the police can act quickly when they need to.
Erin, in your view, or in the view of those that you are surveying with Pauly, what needs to happen to end all of this?
What the residents really want to hear is that there's a date by when these people will be leaving the city. So anything other than that, and I know that the police, the Ottawa police, have been sending out press releases every day saying we've arrested this many people, we've laid charges. The only thing people want to hear right now is that there is a date, and I think there needs to be a date by which they can plan. And people are saying, so people have been saying, the police have been saying, well, we can't tow the trucks because they're too big. And in fact, the tow truck drivers are refusing to help with the towing. because they're siding with the truckers. And so people are saying, then dismantle the cars, like or the trucks, do what you need to do. You can't fill them up with fuel again and drive them through the city. Nobody wants to see that. But we need to figure it out. It can't just go on indefinitely because they're worried about antagonizing these people.
Well, here's the thing. We've got a provincial election in 4 months. So I suppose we can understand why anybody in provincial politics these days is being super careful about what they say, because they don't want to do anything which could, be blown up and dramatically adversely affect their chances on June the 2nd. So, question, what are the public's expectations of their provincial politicians at the moment?
Well, it's precisely because people don't want things blowing up in the city that they feel the province has to help. Because if they don't help, there's risk of vigilantism. People are starting to talk online about taking law into their own hands. The longer this goes on and people can't get on with their lives and they can't sleep, and the disruption, they're being assaulted, and businesses can't open. The Rideau Centre hasn't been open since this started. So if the provincial government wants a peaceful end to this, they should help. I know maybe it's not their job and they can wipe their hands of it. I know why they don't want to. I think a lot of what people are saying is the truckers and these people are the base for the Conservatives. This is their voter base, so they don't want to anger them. I don't know if that's the reason. They seem to want to wipe their hands of it, whereas François Legault was very much in front of it in Quebec. So that's where, and people are noticing that. So when the province says it's not our job, well, how come it was the job of the premier in Quebec?
Gotcha. Erin Kelly, CEO, Advanced Symbolics Inc. Always a pleasure to have you on our program, and we wish you luck getting through the next little while with all of this.
Yeah, hopefully it's a little while.
Right on. Thanks, Erin.
Thanks.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.